What are the odds that I'm one of the lucky ones at level 0, unsimulated? Statistically, the odds are perhaps thousands or millions to 1 against me being unsimulated, because most beings are simulated. Hi, I'm David Chalmers. I'm a philosopher and author of the book Reality Plus, Virtual Worlds and the Problems of Philosophy. Today I'm going to be analyzing the idea of a virtual world or a simulated world as it appears in a number of movies and TV shows.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image.
Okay, this is the Matrix. This is the grandfather, the big kahuna of virtual reality film. You can say, how do you know you're not living in the Matrix right now? And everyone gets it, because people know the Matrix. The Matrix is just a brilliant depiction of the idea that the universe we're in could be simulated. Very reminiscent of some ancient questions posed by the philosopher René Descartes. Descartes said, how do you know that an evil demon isn't fooling you into thinking the world around you is real by feeding you sensations, when in fact, none of it is real? The Matrix is just using digital technology to take that 400-year-old idea of Descartes and to turn it into something we can all viscerally appreciate.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
This is wonderful for a philosopher, because Morpheus is asking the key question. What is real? How do you define real? Morpheus is actually channeling the great philosopher George Berkeley, who said, appearance is reality. He said, like, to be is to be perceived. If you perceive something, it's real. In philosophy, this view is called idealism, and it has the consequence that reality is basically all in your mind. If to be real is to be perceived, then what's real is what you perceived, and that's going to be all in your mind. By that criterion, this Matrix scenario is still going to be perfectly real because it appears real, and that's enough to be real. But most people reject idealism. We want the reality we're dealing with to be something outside our minds, in which case Morpheus's question is still unanswered. What is it to be real?
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Welcome to the desert of the real. Morpheus is actually getting that phrase from the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, who talked about the desert of the real in this current age of hyper reality, where many things that we take to be real these days are somewhat fake. The Matrix puts that idea on steroids. The Matrix wants to paint this idea as a kind of dystopia. And in the movie it is, because it's a kind of prison. Because it's a prison, it's got some dystopian elements, but that's not essential to the very idea of a virtual world. Virtual worlds can be good, they can be bad, it all depends on how they're used.
Okay, he's making his turn onto Lancaster Square. Oh my God, he nearly hit Maryland. Something's wrong. Change frequencies.
Okay, so this is the Truman Show, just around the point where Truman, played by Jim Carrey, is just starting to get the idea that his world may not be everything that it seems. Now, the Truman Show is really interesting because in some ways it's like the Matrix, in some ways it's very different. I mean, the Truman Show doesn't involve any real kind of computer simulation. It involves a perfectly ordinary physical reality, but one that's been populated by actors and by props. So what this actually brings out is that some of the dystopian elements in simulation movies like The Matrix could actually happen perfectly well without a computer simulation. The Truman Show brings out a way in which physical reality can be exactly as dystopian as a corresponding simulated reality. So that reinforces my idea that simulation per se is not bad, nor is physical reality. It just all depends what you do with it.
Years down, dreams are going to collapse with the slightest disturbance.
Sedation. For sleep, stable enough to create 3 layers of dreaming, we'll have to combine it with an extremely powerful sedative.
Okay, this is Inception, which is an illustration of another very old philosophical idea. Almost every philosopher has asked the question, how do you know you're not dreaming right now? Couldn't this be a dream? The ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi asked the question, am I Zhuangzi who just dreamed he was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly who's now dreaming that he's Zhuangzi? How do I know which is the dream and which is reality? I mean, dreams in a way are a kind of simulated reality. But instead of the simulation running on a computer, they're actually running on a part of your own brain. When you interact with the environment in a dream, you're in a way interacting with a virtual environment that you yourself have constructed. The ending of Inception illustrates the philosophical question of dreaming so beautifully. Are we still in a dream, or have we returned to reality? And they use a spinning top to provide some kind of guidance to this. If it spins for a bit too long, we're probably in a dream. Maybe our whole ordinary life was a dream. There's no way to prove that that's not the case. In Inception, again, you may think you've come back to the fundamental level of reality, but you can never know for sure. Could be a dream, could be a simulation. There always could be more layers, more and more layers to escape into.
To hold in sickness and in health, in good times.
So this is San Junipero from Black Mirror, one of my favorite episodes of Black Mirror, and one of my favorite depictions of simulated worlds more generally, because it's such a positive depiction of a simulated world. In effect, a simulation acts as a kind of heaven for an afterlife for people who are on the point of dying. Instead, they get to be uploaded into a simulation and live on as a kind of potentially immortal afterlife. We also get this very nice illustration of uploading, the process whereby a brain might get transferred to a computer by, recording all the neurons in the brain and then running some kind of brain simulation. It does raise many philosophical questions. After I upload, will the uploaded being still be conscious? After I upload, will the uploaded being actually be me? After the character in Black Mirror uploads to the computer, is that her that continues on in the heaven-like simulation, or is that just a duplicate of her that we've created? These are all questions we're going to have to answer before we actually start doing this kind of uploading regularly. Otherwise, people who upload themselves may in fact be just killing themselves. So this is going to take a lot of philosophical thought before we can properly use this technology.
James Halliday saw the future, and then he built it. He gave us a place to go, a place called the Oasis.
So this is Ready Player One, which is really distinctive because it's a development of existing virtual reality technology, whereas the Matrix and Black Mirror are using far future technology. You can see what's going on in Ready Player One is closer to a development of what we have right now. Headsets like for example, the Oculus Quest 2, which I have on here, which I can actually put on a headset and enter a virtual world. And yeah, right now the virtual worlds are fairly primitive. They're not well developed, but it's the start of a process which you can see in maybe 10 or 20 years will lead to really well-developed, rich virtual worlds like the Oasis in Ready Player One. The grandparent of a lot of these virtual worlds is what Neil Stephenson called the metaverse in his science fiction novel Snow Crash. This metaverse idea has since, of course, been taken over, been corporations like Facebook, well, it renamed itself Meta after the metaverse because it wants to get into the business of having people live more and more of their lives in these immersive, virtual, and augmented worlds. And what you see actually in Ready Player One is the vision that quite often the virtual world may be better than the physical world. In Ready Player One, the physical world is getting very degraded, and the virtual world has some utopian elements. I mean, I suspect over the next 50 years, we're going to increasingly divide our time between physical worlds and partly or wholly virtual worlds. And the question is going to arise, is that just escapism? Is that just a diversion? And so on, or is that actually a place where you can live a meaningful portion of your life? And I try to argue in Reality Plus that in fact, at least in principle, one can live just as meaningful a life in a virtual world such as the Oasis or the metaverse as one can in a physical reality.
Have you heard of Bostrom's simulation argument?
No.
So this is wonderful. This is the TV show Atlanta giving us a discourse on the simulation argument that was put forward by the philosopher Nick Bostrom. Bostrom didn't just entertain the idea that we might be in a simulation. He actually gave an argument for taking it very seriously. And it goes roughly like this. Statistically, there's going to be many simulations in the history of the universe. At least it's very plausible there'll be many simulated universes built in the history of the universe. There'll be maybe thousands or millions of times more simulated beings than non-simulated beings. So non-simulated beings will outnumber simulated beings perhaps by millions to one. What are the odds that I'm one of the lucky ones at level 0, unsimulated? Statistically, the odds are perhaps thousands or millions to one against me being unsimulated, because most beings are simulated. And that's what we're getting channeled right here in Atlanta. The statistical case that everything around us right now is a simulation.
Is she real?
Real fake.
Yeah, so Atlanta seems to have an interesting relation to the question of reality. The question comes up a few times. Is all this real? No, it's all fake. It's a simulation. This is actually a question that comes up again and again in thinking about simulations. They're in one sense fake, but they're in another sense perfectly real. So I like to think that here Atlanta is channeling that kind of philosophical analysis.
See, that wasn't so hard.
Okay, so this is Spider-Man Far From Home. I actually haven't seen this Spider-Man movie, although I've seen a few of them. I did see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. There are many different versions of alternative realities with different Spider-Men in each of them. But then in this movie, we also entertain the idea of simulated realities, and Mysterio here is creating these simulated worlds. So it's interesting where in the other movies we've got the alternative physical realities, which we can call the multiverse. Here we have the alternative simulated realities, which I think of as the metaverse. The metaverse is the world of digital realities. The multiverse is the world of alternative physical realities. And you put them together and you get what I call Reality Plus. Reality Plus is our physical reality. It's all the digital realities that we might create, and it's all the alternative realities that might exist out there in the multiverse. That's Reality Plus. And my view is like the digital worlds in principle can be on a par with the physical worlds. That is, the metaverse can be on a par with the multiverse. And you can live just as interesting a life in the metaverse as in the multiverse. So it's interesting to see both these ideas get some play in the Spider-Man movies. Thanks for watching. You can get my book, Reality Plus, that discusses a lot of these ideas in more depth, either in hardback, in audiobook, in ebook, by clicking the link below the video.